Can you grow your gym while being a competitive athlete? I'm Chris Cooper. This is Run a Profitable Gym, and today we're going to tackle this question because it's a big one. For several years, especially among CrossFit affiliates, this idea that being a better competitor, qualifying for the CrossFit Games, or whatever your sport is, will actually help you grow your gym. Now, very few people still believe that's true, but the question remains, can you compete at a very high level in sport while actively growing your gym too? We're going to break this topic down. We're going to talk to people who are much better athletes than I am, who are successfully growing their gyms, and we're going to get their opinion. So we're going to do this in 4 different parts. First, we're going to talk about fields of play, the concept that you can bring your best competitive self to only one place at a time. Second, we're going to talk about how CEOs are like mental athletes. And third, we're going to talk to 2 people who are actually doing it and probably have a different opinion than me, Taryn Dubreuil and Travis Mayer, both of whom have done very high level CrossFit competition and grown their gym. If you want to talk about this more, please head to gymownersunited.com. That's our free Facebook group where we talk about topics like this candidly and privately in a caring community of about 7,000 gym owners worldwide. I'm in there. Some of the mentors from Two Brain are in there daily answering questions and just talking about these things that are important to gym owners. I'm going to take you back to about 2018, and I was testing a blood testing service called Inside Tracker, which is a great service, by the way. And what we were looking at was how many the coaches in my gym and what their blood profiles were. I was very surprised to find that my blood profile came back extremely high for cortisol. It said that I had very high stress, and I couldn't figure it out because to relieve stress, I was working out in my gym and I had all the benefits of those workouts plus my community. I was working on a book that I loved called Founder, Farmer, Tinker, Thief, and all of my businesses were growing. I really shouldn't have had any stress in my life, but it was true. I was stressed out all the time. And so I actually took that blood sample to my MD and he said, Chris, this was really profound. Your body does not know the difference between mental stress and physical stress. The last thing that you need is very high intensity workouts when you're going through this period of very high mental stress as you're growing your businesses. And so I took his advice and I took a little break, left the gym. I told myself I'd be back at the end of the summer. I got on my bike and just started training as a cyclist again, as I had done a decade ago. And at first I took it really easy and my stress level went down. And then I really started to enjoy cycling again. And it actually took me a couple of years to come back to high intensity training at my gym. I found out more explanation on this later on. When I was being mentored by Todd Herman, the author of The Alter Ego Effect, Todd taught me about his fields of play concept, which is that you can only show up at your best to one field of play at a time. Now that might mean you can only show up and grow one business at a time, even if you own multiple businesses. It might mean that you can only show up to compete at one sport at a time. It might mean that you can show up to compete at a sport, or you can grow your business, or you can grow your singing career, whatever that is, but you can only compete effectively on one field of play at a time. The flip side of that coin is that every successful entrepreneur that I know, long-term, has some kind of fitness regimen that they take really seriously. It allows them to focus better, it reduces their stress when they do it right, and they credit their fitness regime with helping them achieve higher levels as a CEO. The key differentiator here is competition. Does competition actually make you better? Can you compete at business while you're competing at sport? And that's the question that we're out to discover today or unwrap a little bit more. I'd love to hear from you in the comments here. Are you able to compete while growing your gym? Does one have to stay at a certain level while the other is growing? Is it like owning 2 businesses where you can manage one while you grow the other as the CEO? Or does the skill of competing actually make you better and lift all boats at once? That's what we're going to talk about today with my guests, Taryn Dubreuil and Travis Mayer. My first guest on this topic is Taryn Dubreuil. Taryn is the owner of CrossFit Function. She's been a competitor in many sports for a long time. She's also growing multiple businesses exponentially fast. Welcome, Taryn.
What's up? Happy
We're going
to
to
be
find
here.
out. We're going to find out. Taryn, quickly just tell us, like, what sports have you done? What sports are you doing? What are you growing in your life right now?
So I started out, I'm like basketball is my nature, but after having to give that up in college, that's when I found CrossFit. So kind of built my CrossFit career. I was a regional athlete for 8 years, I believe. So a long time I
Wow.
spent doing that while I was trying to build my gym. I did the whole retiring thing. So, I mean, a little bit about that. I missed the games by 1 point and got pretty close a couple of years, but was just never able to punch it. So, what basically was a full-time job training just for that. After that, I focused on my basketball referee career, which took me to the highest levels that I could get to nationally and even into some international stuff. So that is still something that's ongoing. And currently at the time, I'm also training to do some Ironmans this year. I'm doing 2 of them. So that's pretty exciting, quite different from what I'm used to.
So several athletic fields of play, but also you've got some businesses that are growing right now. Tell us what you're doing in business.
So the gym is ongoing. It's been open for 13 years. Super successful, does what I need it to do. I have full-time staff. I have GM. I've got 8 part-time staff. So a really big team that are also being supplied successful incomes for them. And then I'm also building a private mentoring business too for companies outside of the fitness industry, because obviously I'm a mentor for Two Brain, called Perfect Day Business Mentorship. So that is also growing like a weed, and I am excited about that too.
All right. So earlier I said that I can only compete on one field of play at a time. Do you agree with that? Or is it possible to bring your full attention and A game on multiple fields of play at a time?
I think you can. And I think you can because I have and still am. And I mean, I'm a little bit biased by that, but it definitely, like, you have to have your ducks in a row. And what I mean by that is there's a few like key elements, and they pertain to business as well as in the sport that you're training for, whatever it might be. So if you can nail down some of those habitual things and those routine things for someone like myself, I am able to partition my focus and my attention when I am doing that single thing at that time of the day or whatever it might be. Okay, so for me, that might look like making sure that time management is something that I've got nailed down, that from this window to this window, all of my attention and focus is on this thing that I'm doing. And then from this time to this time, here's the next thing that we're focusing on. And so just being able to switch your hats like that, is for me was very useful in how I can do multiple things at once.
Did you learn that from sport or did you learn that from business?
I think I learned that from sport because I had great coaches growing up who invested a lot of time in me. And also, I was really smart in school. So being able to hand projects in time and like get good grades and do all that stuff, like you had to learn how to partition your time appropriately. And because I was pouring so much time and effort into basketball, like it was every other hour that I wasn't doing homework or studying or whatever it might be, it was basketball. I was practicing outside of the team's practice just because I wanted to be great at it. So time management is huge as far as I'm concerned.
Do you find that there's any sense of overwhelm or fatigue created by competing on 2 fields of play or 3 at once?
But I think that's where the rest of what your lifestyle looks like becomes important. And so systemizing all of because at the end of the day, it's like, how many decisions do you have to make, right? Out of all of these different things that you're doing. So if you can systemize a lot of it. So for instance, like from a sport perspective, get a coach. And I mean, get a business mentor for all that's concerned at the same time too, right? So that you don't have to be humming and hawing about what you should be doing. It's there, it's written for you, just go out and execute it. From sport, like meal prep, so that you don't have to think about your food. Like that's one less decision there. If you have kids, get a babysitter, like whatever you can pay people to take it off your plate, go and do that, because that's the path of least resistance, right? So decision fatigue is like probably one of the things that makes it overwhelming if like you have all these variables that you have to constantly make a plan about. So that's what I would say for that.
So decision fatigue is one thing. What about just like stress overwhelm?
Yeah, I mean, so that comes back to like time management, in my opinion, because what I would, and this is something I learned along the way too, is what happens in between when you switch hats, right? So let's say you go out and you're hitting a really hard workout or a training session and it's 2 hours long. And it's just like absolutely wipes you. And now you've got a 2-hour business window slotted. So what you do in between that is restorative to help turn your focus for when it does come time to put your business owner hat on. So one of the things that I learned early in my CrossFit career was like, if I was going to spend 6 hours a day training, like a 3 hour block in the morning and a 3 hour block in the afternoon, I had to go and walk the dogs in between whatever was my next task, which was usually sitting down on my desk and starting to work through admin stuff or whatever it might, or coaching, whatever that might be related to the gym. So that hour that I would just disappear into the bush with the dog, that was restorative for me and a time to separate myself from that. And then you look at it from a habitual and routine thing. Like, obviously, if you're eating well and you're sleeping well, that's just going to contribute to a better recovery in terms of like physical stress and mental stress too, for what that's worth.
How much do you train a day right now, and how much time do you spend like focused on actually growing your business? And then maybe we can talk about like what does recovery look like for you?
So I have an hour and a half window from 4 a.m. to 5:30, pretty much every day of the week, where that is my straight business work. That's all like creative stuff where I need my brain for the most, like content production or whatever it might
Yeah.
be there. Then I go into my workout from there. So I might spend like an hour and a half, at most 2 hours, just depends what I'm doing. Whether it's triathlon stuff or I'm working out in the gym, that's my 2 hour block for that. I go and I walk the dog and I come back in, and that's where I do my eat the frog task. So like you sit down on your desk and you're doing all the email
Your
replies and all
P&L.
that forms. So, and that's the general weekends when I have this stuff in my calendar, because I'm doing triathlon right now. That's my longer workouts will come in, where we're 2 hours. Eventually, as I get closer, they'll be longer. So
Okay. One thing that probably helps there is that you have a triathlon coach that's mostly focused on intensity instead of duration, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I only have this hour window. What is the most that I can, or how can I accomplish as much as I can to get what I need out of that hour? So, it might be something super high intensity, or he might just be like, hey, back off. Let's just do this slow today. So at the end of the day, I just have a coach who tells me what to do, which is the key detail.
Do you ever find that there's some overlap between, when your business is more stressful, that affects your workouts or vice versa?
Um, yeah, I'm not going to stand here and say no,
Hmm.
but for a lot of the time, it was a release for me, I would say. And that like compartmentalizing is a strength of mine, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But in this case, I would say it's a good thing, because I would be able to go into my workout and I could put my business worries behind me and just do what I needed to do in my workout, and so on and so forth. It still is that way now, that I can hop on my bike and head out on the highway, and it's like, yes, I'm training for something, but at the same time, it's rejuvenating, because like nobody can phone me while I'm out on my bike. I'm not going to pick up my phone. I'm not going to answer emails. You know what I mean? So,
Okay, well, ironically, I asked you this question right after we had a bike ride on Zwift last week, and you said, no, training for sport actually makes me a better CEO. So, what are some of the traits that you developed through sport and athletic training for competition that are now more helpful to you as you're growing these businesses?
the biggest one I would say was learning how to adapt. I remember showing up for this competition, and the first workout was a 5K run, and I had this like straight pace I was going to follow, and it was all dependent on my watch. And I left my watch at the hotel that morning, showed up to the workout and was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And obviously you have to make a plan on the fly like that, or a plan on the fly like that. So headed out there, ran my best 5K I've ever ran, and didn't have my watch to rely on. So that was a big like adaptation lesson for me. And I often go back to that moment when I get into stressful stuff that's happening in the business. Like, this might be a problem right now, but how can I change my course of action to make this actually a good thing? What lessons can I learn out of this? So adaptation was so evident in all of my career as an athlete and all the things that I've done. And that would be the number one thing that I would take away and apply to my business now. um Aside from that, like, honestly, like I said, time management was huge, because if you don't have that, you're not going to succeed in either of those things, even on their own, never mind side by side. um and I think just one more thing on the adaption was just the ability to filter out distractions, that like, this is what I'm doing, I need to have my brain completely on this is the only time that I have to do this. and then you get into business mode and it's the exact same thing. It's like everything else needs to shut off for a minute because I have this one task I need to execute on this, do it really well, and move on to whatever is next in front of me. Following the programming on your workout is exactly the same way. Like I'm only going to think about these back squats right now, even though I have this like killer of a chipper later on that scares the crap out of me. Doesn't matter. It's about these back squats right now, you know?
Would you describe yourself as having always been a competitive person?
Yes. It's like, that is my middle name.
A competitive person. I've heard you refer to other middle names that start with F when you're describing yourself too. So Taryn, last question. Now through TubeRun, you've worked with a number of gym owners worldwide, and some of these people are competitive. And there's a tendency in our industry to blame failure at running your gym with, well, I'm focused on being a competitor right now. Is that a red herring? Like, are they failing at their gym for another reason? Or is it really because they're trying to get to the games?
I would challenge them. Well, I mean, if I were their mentor, I would look at some of their other work ethic related things in other areas of their lives. Because if they're shortcoming on this, they're probably shortcoming on some other things too. Because at the base of everything are habits. And if you don't have those habits in line, how can you be successful at this stuff? Right?
Yep. So
So
Taryn
I
says,
think, yeah, go. Yeah, go.
so Taryn says that not only is being a competitive athlete not the thing that's limiting your gym growth, but it should be instilling habits that will help you grow your gym between competitions. Is that fair?
And the best part of that is that that can be learned. Like
Yeah.
it's not an excuse that this is just how I am and this is how I'm going to do things or this is why this isn't working. Like, no, you just don't possess that skill set yet. And that's okay. That can be learned, but you need somebody to teach you and hold you accountable to actually follow through on that. So that's why I think you can be successful. They just maybe don't possess the skill set right now.
Perfect. Taryn, do you know any very high level athletes who don't have a coach?
No.
Do you know any very high performing business owners who don't have a coach?
No.
All right. Thank you. Such a fantastic perspective and always amazing to have you on.
Thank you. This is fun.
So one more thing before we sign off though, Taryn. We brought up this case study where a gym owner had hired somebody who is an aspiring CrossFit Games athlete to run their gym, and the gym didn't grow. And after a year, the excuse from both the manager and the owner was, well, he's too focused on making the games, he can't grow the gym. How do you see this from an employer's perspective, or should we hire people who are solely focused on competition?
So when my mentees bring up stuff like this to me where they say that so and so is causing the reason for why this employee is not performing, because that's essentially what this is, regardless if it's sport or something else. The thing that I always say back to them is, have you controlled all of the variables that you can? And once we explore all of that, and I'll come back to that, but once we explore all of that, it's you have to understand that employees don't think the same way that owners do. And so there's that variable that comes into this as well, right? So what I mean by that is, first, like, did that owner give that GM absolutely clear, simplified KPIs for what they were supposed to do? Did they have clear expectations on what they were supposed to do? And did they have clear deadlines on what was supposed to do, on what they were supposed to do, right? Like, those are the variables that they control. But a lot of the times when we first hire GMs, like, we're just so excited to have somebody in place that's going to do all this work and grow the business. And we're like, hey, here's all this stuff, go and do it. And there's no clear direction, there's no expectations, there's no accountability, there's no follow-up. And then the automatic result is, well, they're just not doing their job, right? But it always comes back to the owner first before you look at the employee underperforming. Okay. Which then brings me to my second point, is that we hire these people, even if they're coaches too, because I have the same conversation about coaches, is that we expect our employees to think like us. But if they thought like us, they would own their own gyms too. They would be entrepreneurs in something else, but they don't. They're employees. They want their 9 to 5. They want this clear list of, this is what you need to do, XYZ, and have it done by Friday at 9 a.m. and give them back to me or whatever, right? And if you don't provide them with that, there's too much arbitrary stuff in the middle. There's just too much gray. So it's pretty tough to expect them to excel if you don't lay the line. That would
Okay.
be my first question back to this case study, is like, how actually was everything presented to it? So if that person was training for the games for 6 hours a day or whatever it might be, did you set expectations that for 3 hours before they started training, here's what they had to accomplish? And then by the end of the week, here was their checklist for their weekly things and their monthly things, and so on and so forth. You can control that progress. It's not a time thing. Like, yes, to a small extent, it's a time thing, but most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it's a clarity, expectations, accountability, follow-up thing. I got on a soapbox there. I'm sorry.
No, that's good, because I actually think that applies to owners too. And I'm going to use the
Yes.
CrossFit example, even though this works. I've seen this in cycling, I've seen this in hockey, I've seen this in different, like baseball, football, where you've got a successful athlete, maybe they've won the CrossFit Games in the past. They go to open a gym and the gym tanks. Is that still a clarity and expectations issue?
Yeah. I mean, like, I know I never made the games, but I look at myself when I first started, was everything was so about that. And I didn't even think about what was going on in the gym. The gym just solely existed because it gave me a place that looked like regionals that I could train at, right? And I maybe would put a quarter amount of the effort in just to make sure that the bills could get paid, even though they weren't getting paid. But then
Yeah.
the difference was having somebody there to be like, hey, Taryn, do this. And have you done this? And you're going to do this by Friday and whatever else, right? So I think having a mentor, having a coach, whatever it might be, having that person who is going to follow up and hold you accountable to get that stuff done, like, again, takes all the decision fatigue out of it, like takes all the variables. The less variables there can be, the greater the success will be in both. And that's across everything, not just this.
So the more fields of play you're active on, the less time you have to waste, but you still have time to spend to compete. Okay. Thanks so much, Taryn. So Taryn is competing on multiple fields of play at once. And she says that competing on the triathlon field is actually making her more competitive and better on the business side. And there's an interesting crossover there. My next guest is Travis Mayer, and Travis is not going to be a stranger to you if you're following the CrossFit Games. He's been in the games 8 times. He's also a box owner, the owner of CrossFit UNTD, or United, down in Alpharetta, Georgia. He's been training for a decade with Max Alhaig, who was one of the first guests on this podcast. Just, an interesting link. And I want to talk to him specifically about growing a CrossFit gym and being a competitor at the same time, and whether that's a synonymous relationship, whether that's serendipitous, like one grows the other, or whether one competes with the other. So welcome to Two Brain Radio.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, I mean, so you're an affiliate owner, you're a competitive CrossFit Games athlete. How long have you been doing both?
So I opened my affiliate in 2013. So this May we're coming up on 10 years. And then
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. And then I've been competing, I guess, my first year actually at the games was 2013 as well. So they both actually happened about at the exact same time. I started CrossFit in 2010, October 2010. And
Wow.
then, just missed out my first year because that was the first year they had to open. Ended up taking 60 first when they had 60. Was training really. And I mean, I was only a few months into CrossFit, so I couldn't be that upset. And then the next year ended up fracturing my L5. And then the following year, my first full year healthy, made it to the games in 2013. And then, at the same time, I actually opened my affiliate. But prior to that, I ran 2 other gyms for people that kind of upfronted the cost and money. So I was at that time, I guess, 20 when I first ran 2 gyms. And It was just, for me, it was kind of I wanted to be in the fitness industry and understand and run a gym. And for me, it was kind of like a fun place to train. And I got to hang out and be in a gym all day. And it also helped chase my goal of being a competitive athlete and doing that as a full-time career. And then after I did one, I left. Someone else wanted me to open another one. I did another one. And then I was like, I'd like to do my own, and just things you take and learn from both, and kind of I think helped very early on, of like things I didn't like, things I wanted to improve upon, communication, kind of all those like little things that you don't really think about, kind of set me up for when it was like my time to go off on my own, that it was all successful from that standpoint.
So you had a bit of an on-ramp to owning a business, and you must have had some kind of on-ramp to CrossFit too. Like, you must have been fit coming in if you were that close to qualifying in your first years.
Yeah, I've been very lucky that when I get set on something, I get very addicted to it to a degree. So for me, like trying to be a professional athlete in some way, shape, or form when I was a kid, it was always like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 120%, and that's going to be all my focus and time. And that's kind of, I mean, even when I met my wife, I was like, look, CrossFit's like my baby. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm pursuing. So when we first started dating, she's like, who is this like weirdo? Like, just wants to work out all the time. But then fast forward, it ended up working out.
That's great.
But yeah, that's just kind of how I've been from the beginning. So I think that kind of like on-ramp process of running to other gyms, seeing the ins and outs of things I didn't like, things that I thought could be improved, and then being able to step into it from like a full-time owner perspective, it kind of allowed me to not mess up as much and kind of already start off on a better foot. And then it kind of carried over to the same thing as CrossFit, of my full-time job, I guess in 2013, was still running a gym, but I never really looked at them always as that. I looked at it as like, look, this is where I get to train. I get to coach people and help them because I really enjoy doing that. This is something fun. When I'm done competing, I'll spend more of my time and focusing on growing the gym more and more and more. But it's kind of both happened at the same time, where I've had a pretty good staff and team that have been with me, and some of my coaches have been with me for 8 and 9 years. And so it's like people have followed me, and I feel like that's kind of speaks volumes for what we've done and cultivated and created here. And I think that's what has allowed people to stay, allowed the business to keep growing. And then I just keep learning. And especially now doing the mentorship program, it's been a huge improvement and step up from what we've done previously. But it's kind of cool to be in this situation now, and, you know, like, how can I grow a gym and then still be a professional athlete? And then now kind of talk about the balance of both and how it's all actually worked.
Yeah, and that's what I want to get into, because, you know, to be frank, for most athletes, it doesn't work. Like, I'm sure you can name, you know, a dozen CrossFit Games athletes who own gyms that aren't really successful. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think it varies, and one usually takes the back burner to some degree.
Yeah.
And I would say for the most of my career, the gym aspect has taken the back burner. Like, if I'm being completely honest, like the lifespan of a professional athlete, especially in CrossFit, is limited, right? I'm not necessarily going to be in the sport for till I'm 50. Like, I'm not going to be a master's and keep going. Like, when it's time to be done, I'm out. So that's always been the main goal of, hey, I'm trying to compete. I'm trying to be the best I can for X amount of years until I'm stepping back down. But during that, I've always had a good balance of understanding when it's time to go into the gym and train, I train. And when it's time to be the gym owner and coach and mentor for the coaches, that I put that cap on, and that's what I'm trying to work on. And so I think being able to separate yourself from those different hats, and like, okay, then when I go home, I have 4 kids. So I need to make sure that like my time being a dad is focused on dad time. And then when my time in the gym is for the gym. And then when my time is for training, it's for training. So for me, I've been good at separating and balancing all of those kind of areas. But then when I'm doing those things, the time and dedication for each of those is 100%. So if someone's trying to ask me questions about the gym, I'm like, look, this is my 2.5 hours. I need to train. I'm not trying to be mean, but like, this is my time that I have to focus on this. And I have a GM, I have a CSM now. And so like, I've always kind of had the GM from a while, because I knew I needed someone else to help from the beginning stage, because for me, I'd rather pay them, allow them to take on more of the behind the scenes aspects. And I still am able to train, but I still oversee every single thing that happens and goes on. So I kind of did that very early on in my career, which I think has also allowed that balance of like, hey, look, you need to plan this event. I need you to handle this beside on the bookkeeping side, membership, contact, setting up intros. I'll coach. And then I'm also still training, but kind of having the overlook of all of it has kind of, I think, also taken some of that burden off from like the athlete side. So I think it's just being able to put things in perspective for me of how it actually worked and separating each segment of my life of home life, gym life, competitive life, and being able to step away at certain times and focus those areas on that.
That's something that Taryn mentioned earlier in the podcast. So how do you do that, Travis? I'll give you an example. Like I was just training on the bike for the last hour and a half, and 3 texts came in, and I answered all of them.
Yeah.
Right. It's very hard to maintain any kind of intensity when you're doing that. How do you partition home, training, gym?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of practice. I mean, right. I've been competing now for this would have been my 9th year going for the game, or I guess technically 10th or 11th year. I've missed twice, but it's been about 11 years of building up to this point of trial and error. But usually when I go into a training session, like phones off to the side, and I just don't pay attention to it. Like for me personally, it's like the only thing, I'll write the workout down on a whiteboard, go over, do my training session. Then unless it's like an emergency with like, I got to pick my kid up from school, they're sick, something, then I of course go handle that. But the majority of time, I just leave it alone and try not to check my email, try not to check anything. Even if it comes in, you just let it be. Yes, I might miss out on like, say, an hour of like a response time or something else. But for me, that's not my time right then to do that. And I'm just okay with being like, all right, well, I'll respond in an hour. And because I'm like, this is my time. And if I keep stepping away and answering this email, then that email leads to another email. And then now that 3 minutes of rest I had in between my set has now turned into 15. And now it's like, okay, well, I need to re-warm up. I need to get back into my positions. And I think it's just being able to keep those things distant and separate from each other and know, like, if you're trying to work out, put your time and energy in the training. Like, set that clock. If it's like, hey, I need 90 minutes. Okay, well, this 90 minutes I put do not disturb on, and I'm going to train, not be distracted by it, focus on the training. Because I think a lot of it also changes your mood, your mind. Like if someone sends you an angry email, they're upset about something, they want to cancel their membership, anything, it can make you upset. Then you get frustrated. Then your training starts to go downhill for that day. And then you're mad you didn't get the training in that you wanted. So it's being able to be like, no, this time is for me. I'm going to take the 90 minutes to work out. Then after that, okay, now I'll go answer these emails. And then sometimes you're even more cool-headed about it and respond in a more timely manner and not feel rushed. And for me, that's kind of been how I separate. And then even if I'm at home and training and my kids come in and ask me something, then it's like, okay, well, I'll answer right quick. But then they know like dad's doing his job and that's what he's got to also work out on. But I think it's also not being too hard on yourself about the whole situation. Like life throws things at you. And I think that's also what having kids has taught me a lot about, is that you got to just kind of roll with the punches of like, I'm in the mid session, this daycare or school calls like, hey, your kid's sick. All right, well, that session's done. That's okay. Like my family is more important to me than my training and anything else that's taking place. So being able to just accept I'll get to that training session, or I'm just going to move on and be okay with it. And I think letting it kind of go and not stress and worry about it makes it 10 times easier to deal with, and just be like, all right, well, I'll pick up tomorrow, or you know what, maybe I'll just go do a 30-minute run this afternoon, get some still conditioning in when my wife gets home, or set up. Like I have a full setup at my house too. So it allows me to do those things, which some people don't have access to, but being able to just, I think, separate your time and plan it out. And I'm very structured with how I do everything. So that's probably part of another reason on how it's all worked, of from the time I wake up to go to bed, I kind of have a structure and plan of like, from these hours to this hour, I can train. From here is the gym, from here is coaching, so on and so forth.
That's super interesting, man. Can you share that with us before we get into the other stuff?
Yeah. So usually kids are up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, get them ready for school. So the 2 younger ones go to we actually, our daycare flooded recently. So then
Wow.
now it's even like more driving because it's a long story going to about the daycare situation. But the other two, the youngest ones, go with my wife to a daycare kind of on her direction to her work. And then I get the other two ready, take one to elementary school, take the other one to a different daycare. And then from that situation, go to the gym, usually from 8 o'clock to around 10:30, I do a training session. Then from 11 to probably 12:30, I'm doing gym admin stuff or working on the gym in some way, shape, or form. 12:30, start another session. Usually that's done around 2. Then depending on the day, I'll do another training session after that, or I go pick up my kids at around 2:30, go home, spend time with them. Once my wife gets home, then I'll do another training session, then sit down, do some computer admin work, have dinner, then hang out with the kids the rest of the night. And that's kind of the, I guess, quick overview of like how it works. And it varies day to day with certain times because I coach some nights and that changes the structure, but that's kind of the main flow of my day and how it all goes.
But the point is that you have a plan. So obviously, like, many times in the past, it's even been said, like, if you want to have a successful CrossFit affiliate, you need to be competitive. And then, that was like 2010. And I think everybody's past that now. And people realize that you are like the exception, not the rule. But where do you see this going wrong for other people who are trying to do both, like actually be competitive in CrossFit and or an affiliate? What mistakes are they making?
Oh man, I think there's a lot, right? You spread yourself too thin. I mean, I think you need other people and a good team and staff to assist and help. And I've been lucky enough that I've had a very good staff and system in place and support structure of how when classes, like I have a morning coach and they're amazing. And so they handle the morning classes. And I used to do all that when I first started. Don't get me wrong. When I first started, I coached every class. I did it all and was still training. But I made the things the priority. I didn't go out on the weekends. I didn't go out and hang out with all my friends when they wanted to go party or something. I had a goal and aspiration to be a competitive athlete, and that's what I put my focus on. And that's what I did early on when I was 19. Like I remember even in elementary school, I wanted to race motocross professionally. And so I'd wake up at 5 a.m. before school and I would train and ride a bike or go run or do some conditioning aspect, go to school. We'd have weight training, go home, and hopefully could ride or do something else. But I've always been just driven internally. No matter what I was shooting for, I had some goal, then I was going to go after it and do whatever it took. And so for me, that's even from people that own affiliates now. I think a lot of times people think they don't have time, but they have time. And they're just not operating it and doing it in a smart format or flow of how it kind of works best and ideal for them. And then they get stressed out about it. Then they get frustrated. Then that takes the back burner to some degree. And then you're more frustrated that you didn't spend more time doing this. Where if I told you had an hour to train and that's all you can do and don't let any distractions creep in, spend your hour doing that. And then if I want 4 hours of trying to grow the gym, okay, those 4 hours need to be directly at growing the gym. Like I don't need to go out and eat. I don't need to go out on the weekends. And it's like, what's important to you? Like, right. If it's just specifically like, look, I'm kind of a borderline quarterfinal, semifinal athlete. Okay, well, let's be honest. Okay, what's the timeline of that going to actually be? Okay, well, if I'm doing 2 sessions a day and then there's still plenty of time in the day to make those things work. And if it's like, okay, well, you have kids and other things, I think it's just, there's a lot of time in the day if you do it correctly and the most optimal way for you. And I think the important thing is for each person to try different strategies, try different plans. It's not, my method is not going to be what works for you, and your method's not going to be what works for me. And I think it's being able to have a good understanding of yourself, what motivates you, what drives you, and then that will allow you to be successful in kind of multiple areas. And for me, that's like when it's that gym time, that time is solely spent on like, how are we growing the gym right now? And I mean, I can have a pretty good conversation in an hour with my GM of like, what are 5 plans we're doing coming up in an hour. and then get those things set, because it's like that time is specifically dedicated to sit down, talk with her. How can we make this grow? Okay, perfect. What do our numbers look like? What are these metrics? And I think it's just being able to be dedicated and focused on those times of what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, I think you made a really important
So I wouldn't say
point
there's
there.
necessarily I don't think there's necessarily a right and wrong for someone that's trying to be a competitive athlete and grow the gym. I do think it is very challenging. It is very hard, but with proper time management and a proper drive, and if that's what you want to accomplish, it's definitely possible. I mean, I've done it for 10 years. Like even my coach, when I had my first kid, was like, your athletic career is probably going to be over. And I was like, well, and for me, I like proving people wrong. And I'm still with my coach for 11 years now. So, I mean, love the guy. He's like a brother, but he's like, well, that's one thing you've definitely proved me wrong. It's like, even now that you have 4 kids, you own a gym and you're still a competitive athlete, how you did it, I don't know. But like the fact that I'm still doing it, he doesn't know, but it's just something in me that drives and motivates me, and it's possible to do. It's just got to put your things in a timeline. You got to understand what you're trying to improve upon. And I take a lot of those stressors out, but like I have a coach, he handles all the programming. I don't have to worry about it. I have a nutritionist. What do I need to eat? Okay, here are my blocks. Okay, I have my GM. Hey, these are the things we need to work on. These are the things we need to grow the gym. You take these. Okay, this coach, you need to handle these classes, and then I'll coach X amount of classes. And then there we go. And then it's just being able to sit down, look at it, put it on a piece of paper, whatever it is, and figure out what's most important and focus your time on that to grow it.
So I think what's really key there is it doesn't matter what the plan is, but you have to have a plan. And the other thing,
very important to have a plan.
Yeah, but many don't, and they're, that's part of the problem. The other thing that I took out of that is that, you've got a general manager. So when you're focused on training for the next hour and a half and the gym phone rings, you don't answer it, but it still gets answered. Am I wrong there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would say yes and no. So even if like the phone's not answered, then there's some email or there's some way someone's connecting and gonna follow back up with him.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's definitely been plenty of times we've definitely missed out on leads. And I think a lot of this has actually been like now going through the whole mentorship program, now in like the growth phase of it all, like it brought a lot of light of things that we didn't do well. From like the first steps of when someone comes in, like we've always had an on-ramp program. So we've always kind of done a lot of areas good, but then there's a lot of areas on the back end that we didn't do well, or what things can we try to improve upon? And kind of just, I think it's the same thing, having a plan, that structure of when I'm talking with my mentor of like, hey, these are the things we're trying to shoot for. This is what I want you to accomplish. And for me, it's easy to do that because if I have a plan and if I have an idea, I can go accomplish that right away. And I get excited about that because I know what I'm like checking off the list. Hey, the goal for this March for us was to get 15 people. And right now I think we're at 11 potentially to 15. And then we have 3 other people coming in for on-ramps over today and tomorrow.
No pressure, man.
So it's like, no. But even if I don't hit it, and I'm okay with that. But I'm like, I have a target. I'm shooting for something. Like the amount of times I've failed in training or the amount of times I've failed in business, like it happens all the time. And you have to be okay with understanding that it's going to happen. But like, you just keep going, keep taking away, trying what worked, what didn't work, what can we try next? And I think being aware of those situations makes a massive difference to keep growing and elevating from a business owner and even as an athlete. Like those things go together. If I can understand how to handle those things and put my time spent the right way, then it's going to leaps and bounds over and over. So it's definitely it's interesting.
So here's a question from another affiliate that I'm hoping you can answer for them. So they hired a general manager. This gym's out in Virginia. They hired a general manager who has done well at regionals before, wants to make the games. Their challenge right now is that this person's training about 6 hours a day, and it's clear that the gym comes way down the line in his list of priorities. And so the gym is actually failing a little bit, and they're finding some problems where like the class starts late because this person's workout went 5 minutes over, or they answer the door and he's not wearing a shirt because he's like mid-workout or whatever. How do they address that? And is it worth even trying to fix the GM, or should they look for somebody more business minded to run the business?
Yeah, I think one first would be just having a conversation with them and letting them know that like you're seeing the slack and not the time spent the way you want. Because I think sometimes people, I mean, even in the book that you've written and stuff, just people don't see it the way you see it, right? They don't see it the way like I see it because I'm the athlete, but I'm also the owner. So I have an understanding. Like if their GM was the owner, he would see it differently. It's a different perspective when you're the owner. And I think that's kind of allowed me to be able to do both and separate, because it's like, no, I know when class starts, I'm done 10 minutes at least early. I'm cooled down. I'm in a new shirt. I'm ready to coach. I've already ate. I'm ready to go. But I think for a lot of people, they sometimes just aren't aware. So one, I would say just have a conversation with them and let them know, like, look, these are the things we're seeing happen. One, start training earlier, because like if you're running over 5 minutes, like that, or you stop your set early and you pick it up when you're done and make a third session of the accessory things you didn't get to do. Or if you're in a Metcon and you're not going to finish in time, you don't do the Metcon. Just stop 20 minutes before, if that's the Metcon that you're going to do, and then finish it later when you actually have time. And if there's downtime in the gym or however they actually operate, I'm not sure. But that would be kind of step one of having that addressed, because I think a lot of people just don't always understand that. And he might just be like, oh, well, they've let me skate by doing this the whole time and never said anything, so I'm going to keep doing it. Right. Like, they don't necessarily, he doesn't know, or she. So from that standpoint, discuss with them and just have a conversation. Two, if he doesn't start to make any changes or adjustments, then be like, look, these are now your new roles. We want you to handle XYZ. If you're not taking on these tasks and aren't comfortable doing that, then like we're going to have to reach out to someone else and get a different GM. But if this is going to be important to you and this is what you want to do and train, then I would say fix it and make it work, or we're going to have to let you go. And I think one, that would fire him up to get better at doing those things, or two, he's gonna be like, well, I just don't want to do that and I'm comfortable being done, and I'll just keep training and try to be a professional athlete. But even if you make the games, fantastic. You got to be very well-rounded to be up high and get paid and have sponsors and obligations of things that create this, right? Like there's a very select few of us at the top that have, I get paid to do this as a professional athlete. And I know people that have made the games that don't get paid to do this. Like, that's great. You've made it one time. Sometimes you get some like short-term deals, or it's not very much, but it's definitely not an income to like live off of.
Right.
It could just be like, hey, I have a few $1,000s a month here, but like you still need a job to pay for those things. And then you have the other side where it's like, okay, you've been doing this a long time. You have full-time sponsorship obligations. You have to make posts. You have to support these. You need to go do this photo shoot. Then you're getting paid a full salary. And there's a difference there of, okay, if he's not at that level and able to do that, or she, then you're going to need a job. So you better make sure that for you to pursue this career of what you're trying to accomplish, you need to get your like ducks in a row of how you want to get to that point. And if that is like, I need to be in the gym training 6 hours a day, great. But I also need to be able to make sure that I'm a priority for the gym and improving the gym's overall experience and feel and community. And then those things I think will start to just naturally happen on their own. But they have to become aware of it and get a good understanding of what the owner's wanting. And if they've talked to him over and over and nothing's changed, then I would say you just got to cut ties and move on from that standpoint.
Okay, man. Thank you. So last question. Do you find in any way that sport makes you better at business, or business makes you better at sport? Is there a crossover?
I would say yes, probably in a lot of different areas. Not necessarily maybe that like compound too much on top of each other, but I think it just allows me to communication with people, experiences, connecting with members on a different level, talking about my own personal experiences with being a high level athlete, having injuries, how I've dealt with it, the importance of movement quality, and all these kind of things of like, look, it took me 3 years I did 2.5 to 3 hours a day of just movement to get my squat the way I wanted so I could snatch XYZ.
Wow.
And it's not going to take overnight, like, oh, why is my squat still like this? I'm like, okay, well, how much time are you actually spending on it? What are the positions you're trying to work on? What are these other things? And I'm like, okay, well, now you need to be doing all these other things to start to improve that. And just from like an athlete side, I start to understand that. And then it's easier for me to communicate with someone that, is trying to be competitive, or someone that's just your everyday person that just wants to work out for health and wellness. But a lot of the things I've learned as an athlete, I can carry over and teach and share to them as well. And even it's like, and then when failure happens, okay, look, you know how many times I've failed snatching? You know how many times I've failed squatting? Like, it happens. You're going to fail. That's the whole point. You're like finding your limits. You're testing yourself. So I think there's definitely a lot of crossover. And then I think it also makes me very determined in a lot of ways of like, when I reach out for something and try to pursue it and chase after it, now that I'm doing that on the business side more, run from the mentorship program, it's just allowed me to push even more as like an affiliate owner, like trying to get more creative, coming up with some new cool ideas, and just really try to pursue the gym side of it. And then people in the gym are now noticing it. But a lot of that mentality and focus from being a professional athlete is carried over, because you're like, I want to be the best. I want to improve this. I want you guys to have the best experience. I want you to have an understanding of why we're doing these things, how the progression's working. And so I think it definitely kind of correlates, maybe not the same as what other people think, but for me, that's kind of how I view it between both levels.
That's great, man. Well, hey, thanks for putting us into your, very planned out schedule, Travis. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. No problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, we'll have you back again, man. Thanks and good luck this year.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, Travis and Taryn gave us some really interesting insights. And the keys were that, number one, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan to train. You have to have a plan to grow your business. Number two is that you have to have a coach in each one. The coach tells them exactly what to do, exactly what to eat. And the coach on their business side tells them exactly what they're focusing on right now. Third, both of them have very strong support networks. So Travis has 4 kids and a wife at home. That's amazing. But he also has a nutritionist, and he also has staff at his gym helping him out. Taryn also has an amazing staff and a general manager running her gym. So while these people have grown as athletes and they've also grown in business, they've surrounded themselves with all of the pieces that they need to support that lifestyle. If you don't have those pieces, I still believe that 2 fields of play will conflict with each other. However, both of those athletes are high level for a reason. One of those reasons is focus. They have a focus that I just don't. And that's what's making them successful on both fronts. They can block everything else out and just focus on what they're doing at the time. It's a skill we all can learn. And if that helps you, then that's fantastic. I'm Chris Cooper. This is Run a Profitable Gym. If you want to chat about this episode or share your experience in competition and growing your business, just go to gymownersunited.com. We'd love to have you in that group. There's about 7,000 gym owners in there. It's all positive. It's all upbeat. Nobody's attacking anybody. And we talk about subjects just like this. We'll see you there.